Hey guys, we are now live. Today is Wednesday, the 6th of February. This is the Facebook Ads Power Hour with me, Deepesh Mandalia, where I interview a guest every few weeks, and actually a guest that I actually really want to learn from as well. And it's something related to Facebook ads. Sometimes it's the tech, sometimes it's the creative. But actually, we've got someone live with me today who gets the whole piece. And honestly, there aren't many people that I can genuinely learn from. And Tom is definitely one of them. So I'm really excited to speak to Tom with you guys live. We've talked a lot on Facebook, on Messenger. This is the first time I'm speaking to him live as well. So you guys can get to kind of know who Tom is. So we'll go through finding out a bit more about Tom and then give you guys an opportunity to ask questions as well. So if you guys are on the live, I can see the viewer count starting to pick up now. That's all good. You can fire over your questions and we'll go through them as soon as we can. If you're on the replay, just type in #replay with your question so that we can maybe come back later and try and answer those for you as well. So actually, this week's been a really interesting week for Facebook, with Facebook ads in particular. So if you've been close to Facebook, if you're following my group, CBO has become a big thing. So I don't know if any of you have actually used CBO. Just type in CBO if you have. Campaign budget optimization came in, I think, early 2018. It took me many months to become a fan of this. And when I figured it out, then literally I just wanted to run everything through CBO. But there's a process I go through. There's some settings and configurations to make it work. And we'll talk to Tom about his experience with CBO as well. But the big news of this week is from September 2009, all campaigns will be running through CBO. That's pretty big news. It's a huge fundamental change in the architecture of campaigns and how kind of you set your ad sets and ads and everything up. And I actually spoke to my rep again today, and I've been trying to lobby against this because I don't think it's a good thing. But you know what they're talking about is Facebook have got data which shows when advertisers put the budget in Facebook's hands, they get the best results. Now you can make up your mind of kind of what that actually means and whether you feel comfortable with that. But that's the message from Facebook. So we'll be covering some of that off as well. Guys, if you are on this live, just give me a shout below in the comments. That'd be great, just to know that we have got people listening and all is good. Hey, Jamie. Jamie, from I think you're in Vancouver, right? So you're on you're on the other side of the time zone that Tom's on in Sydney, which is quite insane. And so if you're on the live, fire your questions below. We'll come to those later on. And if you're on the replay, #replay, and we'll come to your questions maybe at some time after we've gone through the live. So Tom's a guy that I followed for a couple of years now. So I knew of Tom through Cat Howl and Ad Hacks group, which is one of the groups alongside Ad Buyers that I've been following for some years now. Hey, Jeff. And like I didn't know there was a link between Tom and Cat kind of working together. But, you know, Tom, I would say I'm kind of mirroring what Tom used to do and actually does now. Is just helping people out, sharing knowledge, and showing his experience and kind of just being there for people, being one of the good guys. And I've certainly modeled from Tom. I've actually learned a lot from Tom as well. Hey, Scott, who's just joined us as well. Hey, Francois. And I'm really keen to speak to Tom to find out more about kind of how he operates day to day, what he kind of thinks about where Facebook ads are right now, where it's going, etc. But honestly, there aren't many people with the level of knowledge that Tom has. Hey, Rutger. Apparently, Rutger knows you. But yeah, there's not a lot of people with Tom's knowledge. So I'm really excited to speak to you today, Tom. So I'll give you the floor. If you could kind of just quick intro yourself, and then we'll go through some questions as well. A big shout out to Obi as well. Hey, Tom and Deepesh says. Over to you, Tom.
Yeah, so a bit about me. I've run Facebook ads for a long time now. So I can remember when you wouldn't have campaign ad set and ads differences. It was all the one thing anyway. So the structure's slightly changed. And I've run lots of multi-currency, multi-store accounts. I've also taught a lot. So teaching, basically you learn a lot more about yourself. So as any teacher will say, the more you teach, the more you learn about your own capacities and what you can do. So we also then basically get exposure to a massive amount of different Facebook ads or different clients and different people trying to do different things. So when you put it all together, you kind of get a really good top-down overview about actually what is really actually happening on Facebook, instead of a little silo of what you're doing in your own store. So other than that, working with some really large corporate clients as well, which is probably more my specialty now. So that we sort of guide them or hold their hand so that they can learn how the disruptors and how the other people that are performing really well on Facebook utilize social media and marketing to compete with them. So it's pretty interesting. We've seen the barriers of entry to big business drop so significantly, where for example, print on demand, you don't even need you need a couple of $1,000s to start things now instead of millions. So yeah, that's my sort of background. What I do now is just run a small agency on the Gold Coast, Australia, and we have a traditional agency. So we have TVCs, and we have a whole bunch of things as well. We do radio as well, so it's not just social, but obviously I lead up all the social side of things.
Cool. Awesome. So how did you actually get into Facebook ads? Like, what was your first entry point in, and how long did it take you to actually figure this out?
Well, we were doing some pretty large media buys for a property development, actually, and it was digital. So we were all wondering about Google Ads, so we were running AdWords mainly. And Facebook came out with the ability to do advertising. So we were easily shifting from one system to the other, knowing what the capability was. So pretty much when Facebook started doing ads, we sort of started doing ads. So obviously it was at a smaller scale back then. Corporate budgets back then were less than 2%, 3% Facebook. By the time I finished with that organization, it was about 20%. So 80 going to traditional media and 20% going to digital. So, and then we were performing so well, actually the media buyers started to send people to learn from us as to how we're actually running Facebook, because we're having so much success. So we're running a whole bunch of stuff from airlines through to fitness influencers and, really large budgets. Some of the corporate stuff, we're spending 90 grand a day on ads. So, when you see that much money going through an ad account, you sort of get to see really what's happening with the broader scheme of things. So, a lot of companies were actually coming to me because they did have large budgets and they wanted to learn how to spend that budget appropriately. So that gave rise to performance media, really. I mean, performance media was in its infancy back then. And, everyone was still bidding for CPM, like so cost per thousand, cost per milli. So it was a really interesting transition from that to actually getting return on ad spend mindset.
Absolutely. And, one of the fascinating things I find is that the more you spend with Facebook, the more stable your results become as well. And it is kind of hard for a lot of people to understand this, that spending $10 a day, $100, even $1,000 a day, still suffer with instability, because Facebook is like a data machine, right? It lives and breathes off of data. Do you think there's like a tipping point where you do find stability, or is there a kind of number that you aim for where you just kind of know where you're going to get that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, CBO has thrown a whole curveball now, but essentially the old adage of $50 per ad set really worked well for a lot of small ad accounts, or ad accounts that were in a very competitive market. If you weren't in a very competitive market and you're targeting audiences that weren't, as traditional, you $250 a day on that ad set was quite stable. But yeah, I mean, we find with clients with $2,000 a day, really, really quite stable. So, it's definitely, I mean, we can, as you know, we can go into the math of it, but essentially it's definitely that 50 conversions and 8,000 impressions that stabilizes things. And it's just basically probability statistics, so
absolutely.
Once it has enough data, it works it out and goes, okay, this is your stable. Now, that doesn't mean it's the best performing return on that spend.
Yep.
But it's definitely stable, yeah. So you got to remember, even if you're selling one item and competing against other people selling that item, you're also competing against everyone else who's targeting an impression for that type of demographic or, age group or gender. So yeah, it's an interesting marketplace.
Absolutely. So one thing that fascinates me about you is I love the art side of Facebook ads, the creative, and I love the data and the science part as well. And I kind of get that from you as well. What's your kind of background, and how did you kind of get more into the technical side of Facebook? Is that just something as a natural progression from your kind of background, or is that something different?
Yeah, so in a past life, I was a photographer, so I did a lot of creative work with creative side. So I was on that side of the world of just creating content. Traveled around South Pacific, taking photos of beautiful resorts, and
wow,
and learned a lot about the creativity. But then I had a natural, inquisitive, scientific mind. So at school, I was always better at those subjects than some of the arts, even though I love the art. So essentially, it was a natural thing where I could understand a web developer, even though I wasn't really good at coding. I can understand the implications and what the issues were when it came to APIs and technical data. So what my first, I guess, foray into marketing was basically database-based driven marketing. So slightly different to traditional advertising where you're doing a lot of awareness. We were actually doing data-driven leads captures and things like that. So segmenting and understanding the segmentation of data and then applying that and then filtering was a natural progression. So then having direct access with Facebook and Google, essentially I learned how the differences between the different types of algorithms that they use. And for some reason I just got it. It was an easy thing to work out. And because I've got so much history in it now, it's quite easy to see where it's come to. So I can understand where CBO shared a document with Depeche while he was on a flight, which was quite a technical document, but it's where I think CBO is headed.
Absolutely.
Because essentially what they've done is they've worked out a model which is cheaper for advertisers and better for consumers. So therefore they're shifting the entire platform to it.
Absolutely. Guys, if you are listening live, just feel free to give a shout of where you are as well. So Tom's actually in Sydney. It's 8 a.m. or just gone 8 a.m. I'm in the UK. It's just gone 9 p.m. And I know we've got some people all the way from Vancouver where I don't know what time in the morning or afternoon it is there as well. Ilya and Phil says hi. If you've got questions for Tom or myself, you can ask them in the chats. I did put #live. If you're on the replay, #replay with your question so we know to come up as well. And I love seeing the hearts popping up when you're talking, Tom. So there's a lot of love out there for the stuff you're going through as well. So let's talk about CBO because it is big news right now. And you touched on the change that Facebook are making. What do you make of, first of all, CBO in general, and then B, what Facebook are doing in September of this year?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, the key to the way I look at it is there's an issue with people don't understand pacing very much. And pacing is a key to knowing about manual bidding and a few other things. But essentially what CBO does is it takes away the issue of pacing. So even if you have a really small budget or a really large budget, it doesn't matter as much as what it did with, say, for example, manual bidding setups. So where it's headed is essentially they're changing the way the actual calculation of the option, which is really interesting. So we've been used to Bear for many years, and Bear is very different from Google in the way that it has a multiple, which is the expected actions part of the Bear calculation. And without going into really technical stuff, when you have CBO, essentially that multiple is applied in real time against a larger budget set than normally what you would have in that one ad set. So, for example, if any ad or creative is performing really quite well in Facebook's eyes, it'll get the most amount of budget, but it's a lot bigger budget than what you would normally get when pacing kicks in on a small budget. So, yeah, so CBO is really interesting. So one of our issues we've been having is the fact that we've been trying to play around with the manual bidding setup. And I was having a quick chat to Pesh about this as well. But we find, so what we do is with manual bidding, sometimes we segment audiences. We use it to actually segment audiences. So a lot of people say we can't now focus on a certain ad set. It focuses on all ad sets. But with manual bidding, what you can do is you can add steps approach to your audiences. So this is not the same audience. This is different audiences within your CBO. However, one's got a higher target bid. So essentially what you're doing is or a big cap, sorry. So the higher the big cap. So for example, you've got an audience you know that really performs well and you want to focus on and you want to keep the top of funnel pumping out to. What you do is you set that bid cap higher than the other ones that you don't feel as relevant. And yeah, that seems to be working. We would used to do that with manual bids in a normal ad set anyway, because there's often obviously option overlap between certain audiences and things that you get, especially with lookalikes.
And actually, just an interesting point on that is when you adjust the budget too frequently on a single ad set in the daytime, it can mess up the learning phase and optimization. But actually, if you change the bid during the day, it doesn't have the same impact on the kind of stabilization of the count. So, like for example, I've had occasions where the let's say the website's gone down, and there's different ways you can handle pausing your ads. One is actually changing your account limit and just maxing out your account spend, and it will just pause. The other one is actually just dropping your bids dramatically, and kind of you can then stop things as well. And I think there's you touched on pacing algorithm. That's huge. I think I try and explain this to people. So if you've got, let's say, a $240 a day budget, just for the sake of rounding, that's divided by 24 hours, not a lot of money that Facebook is then apportioning per hour. And then it's looking at your trend and kind of figuring out when best to spend it. And essentially what you're saying is CBO, because it can spread it out wider, can bypass some of the constraints of that pacing algorithm as well.
Yeah, so like if you haven't looked at the keywords of discount bidding, essentially what it is that's the terms that Facebook uses, discount bidding and pacing. And there's a lot of help documents on pacing, which is great to try and understand it. But essentially it tries to find a stable bid price. Sometimes it bids more, sometimes it bids less. Essentially it's always trying to get you the cheapest, or that's that thing, the lowest cost per conversion. So what it's doing is pacing it out over the entire day. Now, your customers all may want to buy at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. at night. So Facebook does adjust for that. However, it won't spend your entire budget at 8 a.m. It'll just try and eke it out over the entire day, which means that some of those 8 a.m. sales you won't get because essentially it's limited the budget. Whereas the CBO, it's just going to go for it. It'll get all of them. Yeah.
And what's your thoughts on September's enforcement of CBO across all campaigns?
So essentially, what they're doing is they're saying that we've read a research document on it. So if you really read into that, essentially what they've done is a lot of modeling on the new approach. And then when you apply that approach to actual ad accounts, which I think what they've done is they've tested that method out with CBO, campaign budget optimization. And they've seen such success with everyone shouting from the rooftop saying how amazing scaling and CBO, especially the one you did at Black Friday. So those examples are just huge signals for Facebook to go, yeah, that method is better. So when they're talking enforcing, essentially all they're really doing is they're moving the ad set budget area back up to the campaign level, which is kind of the right way of doing it. See, an ad set really is a different audience and budget, whereas what they're doing is the ad set's now going to be just the audience and the budget's going to be set at the campaign level. So it's kind of just a shift in thinking. So you can have multiple campaigns doing multiple same as what you had before with an ad set. In fact, a lot of the really bad ad accounts that I used to look at were set up that way anyway.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
We kind of clean things up, and Facebook loves the fact that we segment them into the layers of funnels, so 0, 1 through to 0, 6 layers.
Yeah.
However, you get a lot of ad accounts that are one campaign, one ad set, one creative. It's just
I've seen that, and I think I don't know how people end up with it. It just seems to be such a common thing. I guess there's someone out there teaching this kind of approach. And I think, one of the things that frustrates me about, like a lot of people will say, I just go to YouTube and learn it for free. A lot of these YouTube videos are really old and they're teaching things that are just out of practice. And I think, I tell people, if you want to learn Facebook ads, first of all, learn it by doing. If you don't know anything, then start with Blueprint and learn the basics. But the quicker you can actually get into the ad system and start learning, the better. But at the same time, like, for example, you touched on the funnel system. I'm a big fan of using a funnel system because I see Facebook ads as a marketing problem, not a technical or a data problem. And then it comes to relationship building and stuff like that. But I don't think Facebook help with that as well. So I don't think Facebook really guide people to be thinking in that kind of sense as well.
Correct. And I mean, we're a technical background. So, like you were discussing seasoning the other day. And
I love seasoning. I just saw that Gil just joined us as well. We talk about seasoning all the time. Yeah. The thing is, and I don't know where you sit on it, but I hate the term seasoning because I think it's just thrown people around different places on what it's about. But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah. So the issue is that Facebook talk about pixels and optimizing your pixel and all these other things. Now, we know it's optimizing an ad account or optimizing a value within that data set. However, because they use the terminology pixel, I think essentially we're talking about two different things. Now, as we know, if you really want to get semantic on it, a pixel simply is literally a piece of code that doesn't fire. It loads a piece of, an image. That's essentially what it is. But you got to, like, when you're teaching, essentially you got to break things down. So some of the YouTube videos are really good for a certain level of learning, and then they're not for others. So if you really want to get hyper technical, then you've got to speak at that level. So, I mean, a lot of times, for example, the corporate clients I'm dealing with, they are a mix of highly technical, highly financial focused things where we're doing CPA glide paths, for example. Now, CPA glide path is a predictive model of how things would actually really work over time, and it's quite deep. However, you couldn't even come close to teaching that.
Yeah, sure.
Who hasn't understanding, a over time glide path. There's no way you can actually. So yeah, so it's all about finding the right person to teach at your level and your language. And some people will resonate to certain types of language. So dumbing things down with terms like seasoning can help. However, they do confuse as well. So finding clarification. And Facebook's always trying to fix that. However, they just haven't kind of found a really good medium yet.
Yeah, that's right. Just giving a few shout outs. There's a few hellos. Ilya from Latvia, Obi from UK, Phil Winton says, morning, gents. So I guess you're on Tom's time zone there as well. Matthew says, Tom, are you in Brisbane? But I think you mentioned you're in Sydney.
Yeah, I'm in Sydney with clients today, so down in the big city.
Lucas says, Tom, you legend. Thanks for all your help. Lucas Tanaziak. Jamie says 1 p.m. over in Canada. Steve says, hey guys, UK. Megan's in Philadelphia. Hey. Kat's in Vancouver. Rutger says, bots and beer. Beer or bear? I guess it's beer for Rutger, but it's bear for us.
Yeah, that's it.
Vanessa says hello. Matthew's also in Australia as well. And hello from Brooke, Jill, Vanessa, and Jules giving us his seasoning emojis as well. Now, one of the things I try and explain about the pixel is the pixel is just a data collector. So you kind of just touched on that. It's a piece of code. It's just sucking. I call it the data whore. It's like just going after all the data. It doesn't care. It just wants all the data. Actually, it collects far more than people realize. Like if you think about your whole HTML structure, people can see in Google Analytics the amount of data Google can collect. Facebook are collecting just as much as that as well. So they'll know the browser, the how many times you've visited the site. There's loads of stuff they collect. Then the data is held at various levels. So one is the account level, and the pixel itself, there is, like if you go into Facebook Analytics, it's at the pixel level. It's not the account level. And so there are kind of different understandings of, and it makes it hard for us to explain because the pixel is a piece of code, but then when someone goes into Facebook Analytics, it's at the pixel level. And so that confuses things as well.
So it's like talking about company setups. Essentially a company is its own personality or its own person, and the pixel data is its own, it's independent thing. You can share across accounts. So when we're running global accounts where we have 5 different ad accounts for the different currencies, essentially you're sharing a global pixel across all accounts. So yes, the account level has data coming from that pixel and data coming from that ad and audience set, but the pixel is also independent in the way its data is held with Facebook at a higher level as well. But the other complication is a pixel essentially is a post-click, post-user input from the platform. So there's all this data that's happening on platform, and a lot of web pages will actually load on platform, not in. So it's called in browser. So in platform browser. So that browser actually is collecting a lot more data than the pixel anyway, because it's checking dwell time, it's checking mobile phone connection speeds, it's checking geolocation. It's like, there's a lot going on inside that setup. So when you're talking back at that level of, how ad accounts optimize, essentially that, you got to talk about that dependent variance. I don't know if you get into that, Depeche, in your courses and stuff. But essentially, it's trying to find something that's very similar amongst other people who have purchased your product or have done a certain action on your thing. So those dependent variables are changing all the time, and they've got very different inputs based on what's actually happening. So yeah, it's a very complicated.
And this is something I try to explain to people also about when you go broad. So no demographics, no interests, or maybe just a broad demographic, no behaviors, no interests, no lookalikes. And especially when your pixel has picked up a lot of data, not only does Facebook know the profile of your target market, it also knows whether the people who you're after are in a given audience. And I think you and Kat were one of the first to talk about schema and markup and stuff on the website. One thing that I try and stress to people is every time you as an individual person browse a website, whether you're logged into Facebook or not, they're still trying to collect data, because all these websites also have the Facebook pixel installed. So if you're searching for dog food, you then go on another site and you're searching for, print on demand teas and it's dog related. Facebook is building this profile up in the background. So this person is a shopper, they are active, they're interested in dogs, etc. And then you could go broad with your target. Facebook knows from your website, based on the markup of the HTML, that your website is about dogs and print on demand, and now all of a sudden it starts to match it as well. And I find that fascinating, because Facebook has far more data than I think people give it credit for as well. I wouldn't say people give it credit for, and there's a lot of concerns around privacy and data, but as marketers, I think a lot of people underestimate what Facebook actually know.
Yeah, so diving into schema is a really interesting thing. So essentially, if you've got a product that's common, so that's not, you don't need a lot of education about that product. So someone knows that it's a bottle of water, or it's a dog food, or it's something. It's a common product that people buy. Then the schema data is solid, and really, like, we used to freak out when our media buyers, so as junior staff, used to set up ads and they didn't set the targeting or something, so it just went out broad, wasted the client's money. But now that actually happened to us right at the start of the schema setup, and all of a sudden it started working, and I couldn't believe my eyes. And I went, wow, this is broad, really broad-based stuff. And then we tried that broad-based dynamic product ads, and that worked well for certain clients, and we couldn't work out what was actually really happening, because we're so used to horizontally scaling everything, segmenting and working out exactly who our target audience would be. And then schema came along, and essentially schema, so before Cambridge Analytics and all that stuff, Facebook used a thing called OG tags, so Open Graph, as their primary metadata. And that was so easily manipulated. So essentially what you could do is you could post that this was about chicken food, and the website would think it's about that, and Facebook would then approve your ad for that. But all you do is then change without changing your OG tag, you could then change that content on the page to selling fake handbags, and Facebook wouldn't rescan it. So it was really having problems with the fact that, you could quite easily clickbait or change what was actually really the content of the page. So what they did is they introduced Schema, which is a much more robust setup, which is more like the system that Google were using. And that was a game changer for it. Essentially, all of a sudden the algorithm had a lot more data, far more data than what it used to do. So dwell time, like browser type, all that kind of stuff started flowing into Facebook's data collection, not just the simple metadata that was on an OG tag, which is essentially what is this called and what's the image.
Absolutely. One of the things I spoke to the auction team about was, so I'm interested in knowing what the quality signals are that go back to Facebook. So there's quality signals on your account, on your campaign, on your ad set, your ad, your landing page, your load time, your conversion rates, even your purchase and repeat rates, all the way through are signals that go back to Facebook. And one of the things I was curious about, so one of the strategies from the last few years has been delaying the pixel load. So the idea was you delay your pixel load so that you don't send Facebook back the data of bad users, so essentially your bouncers. But actually what the auction team was saying is they're also using the pixel load time to determine the time between outbound click or leaving Facebook, and then also the pixel loading. Because they got access to so much of this data. So actually, if you delay the pixel load, you're potentially harming your performance in the auction, right? Because Facebook thinks you're
of that quality multiplier. So bringing it back a step, essentially the EA is more important than that part of the algorithm. However, as Deepesh is saying, essentially quality is still very significant. So the relevant part of that thing, so not relevant score, relevant part. So if there's
the user value.
Yeah, the user value and the quality score add up to give you a higher, and that's something you can control. So the bid in that bit you can kind of control, whereas the EA is very hard to control. Essentially, it relies on the conversion rate more than anything. Right. But the getting into the quality score, so pixel load time, I saw that discussion. And look, if you delay a pixel for something with a lot of traffic, so say if you get an affiliate marketing team to pump out your content and you get a lot of really bad traffic, a delayed pixel works really quite well still. However, if you're really trying to do performance marketing where you know your audience, you know your numbers, you know your target audience, and you're using especially automatic bid, essentially you're only sending traffic, really relevant traffic to your website in the first place. Now, we work with some really large companies, so we actually work with Double Verify. And if you guys haven't checked them out, check them out. They're an amazing company that just came out to partner with Facebook as well. And they look at ad fraud. So, yes, ad fraud is real and it happens. So you have all these farms doing clicks through your ads. Now, where I'm going with that is essentially the system's always trying to reduce that issue. And by delaying the pixel load, especially to a lot of people put it at the bottom of the page instead of at the top. And essentially what that's doing is, it does give a lower quality score. But again, remember, like if you've got a really high EA and a huge amount of traffic, it's not as important. But it's look, I don't do it. I used to do it all the time. I used to love it. It was one of those tricks that we were trying to use for years to try and outplay Facebook. We used to do things like send a different value back, thinking it'll change the algorithm.
Absolutely. You can play around with it quite a bit. So there's value in the basket. There's where the purchase event fires. And I've seen people double firing it. And you can get quite crazy with it. And I think a lot of this actually comes from affiliate marketers. Because I think, honestly, the affiliate marketing world, some of those guys, and I used to be in it myself, really think outside the box. And sometimes in a really, really good way, sometimes in a kind of not so moral way. But I think a lot of the cool ideas actually come out of affiliate marketing as well.
Yeah, like, they're all using their mum's Facebook accounts because they got banned. Like they're the kind of crew that I love learning from, because I see what they're doing black hat. However, dealing with corporates, we can't do black hat at all. We're very much above board. So having a delayed pixel fire even wouldn't pass their high-risk campaign stuff that they run. So, you've got to be very compliant. And the more you play to Facebook rules and try and play with it, and the better you play with it, the more detail, or the easier it is to deal with all the changes that happen.
That's right.
So, you've got a delayed pixel fire theory, and it's working really well for one ad account, and it may really be bad on another ad account. Or some change comes out and all of a sudden stops working. So you got to.
And this is an ongoing challenge, because policy changes so quickly nowadays. There's people who have had legit accounts, legit ads, legit landing pages, where policy is now shifted, and there's an old ad that gets flagged and shuts the account down. It is really, really insane.
Yeah, we've started deleting ads now. We've never used to delete ads, but it's incredible. We've had ads that haven't run for a year, shut an ad account down. And it's difficult. And, we have to point out to the policy team, well, we're not running that ad. And yes, it was against policy back then, but it's not, it was not against policy back then, but it is now. Or, like the crypto stuff, when that kicked in, wow, like that was a shock to the system. I had clients wanting to spend, millions on the thing, and all of a sudden you couldn't do it. So, it's a hard thing to play around with. Play by the rules, and learn to adapt with the systems is probably a far more stable approach.
Absolutely. I can see some of the questions coming through. We'll get to those really shortly, and you can ask Tom questions direct. If you're on the live, just type #live with your question. If you're on replay, #replay, and we'll cover off as many of those as possible. So one thing you kind of have mentioned is that you do get information from Facebook, and actually you get a lot more info, especially the deeper stuff, before I do. And I've actually chased my rep and said, this person I know has got this particular file. I'd love to have access to it. And even they're like, what is this? We've never heard of this before. So I'm curious, like, how do you actually get deeper access to Facebook's almost like alpha material before it comes out anywhere else?
Look, we've got a really strong relationship with Facebook. It's not always through reps. It's through knowing people that are very close to the marketing organizations or technical development. So we do a lot of stuff with developers, and essentially they get a lot more insight than the advertisers do anyway. So updates and changes happen quite regularly. The other thing is I listen deeply to what everyone's problems are or issues are on all the ad accounts that they have, So
So you're like the Facebook ad psychiatrist.
Yeah. Well, the problem is these guys don't, the ads guys, the reps don't even know really what's coming out.
Yeah.
So you got to go a little bit deeper to that. And then essentially you've got to know people who are wanting to test things out. Now, Australia and New Zealand is one of the 4 main English-speaking target audiences that is very similar to the US in the way of demographics and buyer behavior. So essentially we're a test bed.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but obviously I've done alpha testing with Facebook, done beta, a lot of beta. So having direct access to those things, essentially they know, okay, this guy's running $1 million a month in advertising, so let's throw something his way to find out whether it's going to stick or not.
True. We won't talk about the client that you have right now, but you've got $1 billion client. What's it like running Facebook ads for these guys?
Well, it's such a struggle. I mean, the corporate beast is a hard one to tackle. Essentially, you got to have corporate training. So I spent 6 to 7 years when I was doing photography in corporates. So I know how to handle a corporate, and I know the corporate politics is involved, and I know budgeting, and I know purchase orders. And essentially, if you can navigate around that, you know how to speak to them. But, I mean, without being egotistical, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, hey, you've had a really bad run with these media crew that, not all media buyers are bad. Some are really, really good, but some haven't got the client's best interest at heart. They've got their bottom line at heart, and essentially those clients are burnt pretty heavily. So essentially running Facebook ads for them, it's quite easy. Like you can get a corporate client that has had such bad performance on ads for so long. You do something simply like I did retargeting, they go, oh wow,
True.
Like they're all buying on impressions-based systems. Now it's really good for brand uplift and awareness. However, it's quite poor for really competitive markets, which most of them are in for FMCG. So this is one of the largest FMCG clients in the world. They've got multiple brands, and essentially they are just really interested in us. So what the small guys can teach the large guys was a speech I did back in Hawaii a year ago. But it's really important, like we have got a lot to give these kind of guys to say, hey, you want to learn. So essentially what they're doing is they're sending an entire team, their entire internal team out to learn from us and sit in our office and actually see what we actually do, because they're just so fascinated in how we do it. And the cool thing about that is I also have some amazing friends like yourself in really successful or high-end digital marketing companies that are doing amazing things, but I also have them in Google as well. So I'm able to reach out to some acquaintances in those areas and give them, the best of the best. And when they actually get to talk to the best at this, and their mind's just blown as to the potential. Like messenger marketing right now, like they're all just, can't even believe. So me and Ruku do Bots and Beers, which is a messenger marketing setup. And essentially when we're teaching that, you apply some of that stuff to some of these corporates, they're just like, you can do that. And these guys are sitting there going, wow. And they're sort of scribbling notes down and trying to work out, that they can actually achieve some incredible things like extracting data and getting their CRMs, because they've got massive data models themselves.
What I find interesting about the corporate world is they've been conditioned by large media agencies that are used to buying on CPM. So whether it's TV, whether it's display media, Twitter, LinkedIn, even Facebook. I've worked with agencies way back where they were buying on Facebook and selling on CPM and said, we'll give you, 5 million impressions on Facebook. But the thing is, a lot of these corporates are still stuck in that kind of mode. And a lot of them want to hire in people that are traditional marketers. And there is a big disconnect. Do you think that there's going to be a tipping point where a lot more of these corporates are going to come into Facebook, actually start making more money out of it? Or do you think there's still some way away?
Yeah, well, we've definitely rustled some feathers with this latest client in the Australian industry. The Australian industry is quite small, so essentially it's pretty big news, and some of the bigger media buyers are taking note. But it's not a thing where you're against media buyers. Essentially, it's just that they don't have the talent or skill sets needed to do this type of direct marketing approach these guys now want in their marketing mix. And when you're doing B2C and not B2B, you'd really need performance marketing in there. And direct, basically the issue is the competitor are doing it or have been doing it for 5-6 years, and they've got to compete. So, that's how they sort of came. So is there a shift? Look, I think for us performance marketers, our time is now, where we are really in the ear of the large corporate players. The other thing is a lot more budget is moving across. Now, all these guys have used Facebook and Google, and they're really quite annoyed at the platforms. They don't like them, mainly because they spend millions of dollars and they go, well, why won't you do it our way? Mm. And Facebook and Google are saying, well, you've got to play by our rules and we don't care. So it's an ego thing, and essentially when they get over their ego and apply performance marketing to it, the platforms are incredible. So I literally walked into the office and he says, it doesn't work. And I said, let me prove you wrong. That's it. And the guy gave me the entire digital account. So it came down to, hey, I can do this, and knowing the confidence and spending millions on ads, you get a really good confidence about, okay, yeah, I know where they've gone wrong, and I know I can prove the results from that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there's definitely a big shift in digital marketing at the moment. So I think I hope all you guys are really prepared for it. It's the wave is definitely about to really hit, and a lot more specialist marketing teams. Even the media buyers use specialist marketing teams, so they acquire or buy companies like ours just so that they can get talent in there. That's so right. That they can then do this type of thing.
That's right. We're going to come to questions in a few minutes. I can see some questions come through. So just type your questions in below if you want to ask Tom. Honestly, this is a great opportunity because there aren't many people at Tom's level. So it's get your questions in. One thing I wanted to ask is, what's your kind of favorite scaling strategy? Because scaling always comes up, and people have their preferences. I'm keen to know kind of where do you sit on this?
Yeah, well, so me and Scott from Rival chat about this all the time. Look, you've got to really define your audience, and also, so there's an inverse. I say there's an inverse relationship between horizontally scaling and vertical scaling, right? And the issue is, it can be very nerdy. So the issue is, every client is different, every audience is different, so you need to play different scaling techniques to different types of audiences. If you've optimized and you're down to like a 400,000 or 500,000 size audience, then scaling vertically is not going to go down, because essentially you're going to burn through your audience. You also got to remember that you'll only ever reach 60 to 70% of that audience in a cost-effective way anyway, because people aren't on Facebook like us every day. You know, they'll jump on once a month. So 30% of the audience is that type of client. So they're a lot more expensive to reach. So when you're talking vertical scaling, it's very different to horizontally scaling. Horizontally scaling, I would call more optimization scaling. So it's finding different pieces to scale and finding more performance at. But look, layering, my favorite thing used to be layering. I used to love layering. So layering different audiences, different lookalikes, expanding lookalikes, things like that. But now, obviously, CBO is just knowing what I know about scaling vertically and horizontally, and then applying that to CBO. It's just game on. Like it's just an amazing way of looking at how ads will work really efficiently. Now, I haven't cracked one audience with multiple manual bid on CBO, as I was talking to you about. It's still feeding out on one audience, not all of them. So it may be just my account, but essentially, yeah, I'm testing a whole bunch of things. And as you know, Depeche, look, we test likes campaigns once a month. We test all the objectives once a month, just because we don't know what's changed and what's working with those types of objectives. So multiple objective tests are always important in scaling as well. So test and scale, test and scale, test and scale, and then yeah, you crack.
So one thing I find works with CBO is running rules and automation so that you're cutting out the bad performance. Because what I find with CBO is, so you start off with whatever budget. There's two ways of looking at it. You can start with the budget that you want to spend. So let's say your budget's $500 a day. You start with that and then let it kind of continue. Or you can start with a really high budget and really throw the kind of budget in early at the auction, and then cut your bad performers. And I found both of those can work, but certainly working the rules just to reposition the spend seems to work really well. So one thing I kind of really focus on is the first 500 impressions counts for a lot for an ad. And you can get a really good ad that has been performing well. The next day ends up in a bad auction. It doesn't mean the ad's completely dead. And you can look at like delivery insights and stuff like that to find that out. And often what I do is I'll pause the ad if it's bad, and then I'll try it again. So I'll automatically restart it the next day and kind of get that process going. And that for me seems to get the best out of CBO. So you give CBO the chance to work with multiple ad sets, multiple ads in any given day, pulls out bad performers, let the good ones continue, and then restart them the next day. And in fact, my automations automatically do that 3 days in a row. And if 3 days in a row it's bad, then it doesn't get restarted again. And you can get really complex with the rules and stuff, but that's really helped. The other thing that's really helped, and I'd be curious to get your insights on this, is 1 day click optimization and not 7 day.
Yeah,
and that for me was the biggest change that I put in place for CBO that got me consistent results. Because previously I was always like, I want to give it more data, 7 days, etc. But what I figured out is, because CBO is apportioning the budget to different ad sets and different ads in a given day, actually that 1 day makes a big difference. And so, for example, if I'm working on an AOV of, let's say, $200 average order value, and I'm using 1 day click attribution, then I might do initiate checkout or add to cart rather than purchase, because I'm not going to get enough hits on that particular objective. So they're the kind of things that I'm shifting and changing to try and get the best out of CBO as well.
Yeah, look, it's like you can definitely set and forget CBO, and it'll work for a couple of weeks without you doing anything to it. Setting rules and optimizations is definitely it's applying what you know from your ad sets, your normal ads to CBO, which is great, as what I said for horizontal and vertical scaling. However, really looking at the core issue. So you got to look at the elements of what an ad set is. An ad set is budget, and it's also objective, and it's also audience. So that audience may shift from day to day to day. So having 7 days gives it a very average approach to doing it. So the other thing is, you remember that it may take 3 or 4 days for that ad to be attributed that conversion. But in 3 or 4 days, your budget's moved because the CBO moves daily. So that's probably the main issue with that. Essentially, having out at 7 days, the CBO's moved off that ad because it didn't think it was performing, but it actually did. It just didn't convert. So you guys can actually see that in your Google Analytics, where you can see time to purchase. So say if someone has clicked on an ad and then they've clicked on the thing, but then they've gone away and it takes 2 days for them to purchase, things like that, not great for it. Whereas if you have something that's an instant buy, so it means deal with a lot of FMCG stuff where you're, fast moving fashion or that kind of stuff. It's impulse buy, so people, basically buy it. They don't. It's not a huge consideration phase or education phase to the funnel, and as a result, 1 day is definitely way better. So it's when doing optimizations for CBO, I reckon there's a whole bunch of techniques that we're playing around with and testing. The jury's still out. With some things I thought was working. One thing we did right at the start is we actually had a massive budget, and then the client had sales team. One of the sales team guys left, so we had to cut the budget in half. And we did that, and we actually got a better performing CBO than when we had it at full. And then as we scaled it up, it still stayed at what it was before. So the algorithm had basically relearned to deal with a very small budget.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing technique when you have that flux,
That's actually something I deploy. I call it the Punisher method. And I found that when you drop the spend down, essentially what Facebook sees is a bad signal, because if you as the advertiser drop the budget down, you're telling Facebook something's not working. And what I find is Facebook goes and tries to find better audience for you. And then you start to step it back up. And I think that there is something real about that as well. There must be like a red alert that goes off in Zuckerberg's office when the budgets are dropped, and like he's putting all these AI bots out there to try and fix it. But there's something going on.
Yeah, look, in that document I sent you, there's a little couple of key things in there. So Facebook will add not funny money, but money to an auction so that, in their models to test to get other people to spend the rest of their budgets in the day. So I think there's something in that. When you drop it down, you sort of confuse it a little bit that way. But in the end, it'll stabilize. But punishing, it certainly works. Again, even with all our knowledge, we have no idea exactly what's really doing that. But it's something to do with either the pacing or that the way that Facebook loads up.
Absolutely. Just before we go into questions, so I want to ask you, if you had a blue ocean in front of you and you could do anything in the world that you wanted to do and you weren't forced to do Facebook ads, if you are feeling like you're forced to do it, what do you love to be doing right now?
Oh, look, these guys are doing some Antarctic expedition down, trying to find a boat down in Antarctica that was from Theo. So it's definitely different thing. So it's exploring, and like I love from the travel side of things with photography. I love seeing different things and exploring. So my mind's always inquisitive. I've applied that inquisitiveness to a fascination in the technology and the software and the people involved in ads. So it doesn't mean that I'm not happy or satisfied. I love doing this, and if I had billions of dollars, I'd still be doing this. It's just that, if I had a chance to have internet access down in Antarctica, I'd probably be doing that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, pretty boring sitting on a boat looking for another thing on the bottom.
I don't know if you can see the questions. Can you see it come up on your screen?
Couple, yes.
Okay, cool.
Targeting. Yeah, look, guys, smaller budgets are very difficult. When you're doing $10 a day, £10 a day, Facebook is by far the best platform for getting your results at that smaller budget. On Google, it can be quite brutal. You'll spend your money and you won't get anything. However, you are competing in an auction with a lot of people. So essentially your creative and your offer and your continuity has to be spot on, and your quality score has to be spot on if you're using smaller budgets. So
yeah,
biggest tip for that is make sure that you've got the rock solid offer, the rock solid targeting, and the best user experience you can possibly get, and you'll compete at the smaller budgets.
Absolutely. Really good question here from Gil. He's wondering why you're not by the pool.
The pool. I'm down in Sydney, Gil, so I'm in corporate offices all day. So no pool today.
Question again from Gil. I don't know if it's a question or more of a statement. Yeah. So
it's look, I was chatting to Mike about this. People don't get the difference in algorithms. So Facebook has a different type of option. It's an actual, the name, loses me at the moment, but it's called a different type of option compared to Google. So if they're used to running Google or even affiliate marketing or any of those other techniques, or direct response, not direct response, but direct mail, they're just not going to get the fact that the little guys compete with the big guys. So they're all used to the bully method or blanket marketing, as I call it. So blanket marketing is essentially just overwhelming audience with budget. Now, Facebook doesn't like that. So if you're doing that, yes, it can work. However, Facebook can penalize you quite heavily for it by shooting up the CPMs. But what it does is, because of that EA part of the equation, essentially lets the little guy compete with it. So the reason why they don't get it is they just don't understand the fact that the auction is completely different, and the little guy can compete with the big guy. If they don't get that part, it's very hard for them to run proper Facebook.
Yeah, and it's similar to kind of what you were mentioning about print on demand in some of the chats we've had, and how seriously easy it is, whether it's print on demand, affiliate marketing, dropship, to actually get started with Facebook advertising, get traffic to your site, and actually make money. And I think the bigger players don't realize how low that barrier of entry is, especially with Facebook as well.
I had a great chat to my friend Trevor Chapman about this in Croatia. And look, if you haven't got a defensible product, and in fact something that no one else has got, essentially you're fair game. Even if you're the biggest brands, the $1 billion brands in the world, people can compete against you, and they're going to. So supply chain logistics is reduced to hardly anything. Like delivered by Amazon's an amazing service. The other shift that we're seeing is the drop shippers are doing some amazing things in the States, but then the Chinese companies are learning, well, why can't we just go direct? So they cut out the drop shipper and start selling their own product on a branded website in the States. So it's spinning around both ways. So people who are actually developing the product, if they know that a certain shirt with a dog face on it works really well, then they'll do it themselves.
That's right. We had a Chinese company approach us saying exactly that. We want to run our own e-commerce. We know which products are selling. Can you run ads for us? And it's like they aren't silly. Like a lot of these people that resell on AliExpress are buying even cheaper from places like Alibaba. They've got direct relationships. Like most of the sellers, or a lot of the sellers on AliExpress, know that the people buying are not consumers. They know that it's B2B. And they're taking advantage of it. So I think it's all different multi-levels of profit everywhere.
Yeah, it's tourist tax in India, but in Asia. So essentially, we are charged a lot more than what they can get charged. So they're obviously charging a profit, and then they can compete at a high level. But it's an interesting shift. So even us amazing talented marketers find these incredible products, stick it out there, sell it really well, and then get undercut by our own suppliers. So it's a very interesting one.
That's it. Another question from Gil. What's your opinion on being so the forced move from Facebook on CBO?
Yeah, as I said before, look, it's just an interface. I treat that as an interface change. So essentially, you're moving from an ad set level audience targeting to a campaign level. Now, will it make ad accounts a lot more messy? Yes. Will we have to do multiple setups at campaign level? Yes. But look, CBO is such an amazing option change. I think if you really understand it and learn it, and you use that manual bidding technique to do staggered or staged targeting of your key audiences, there's no reason to have multiple campaigns anyway. It's only if you're doing multi, like SKU, like dropshipping style things that you'd really want to set up multiple campaigns anyway. So
one of the sorry, go on.
CBO top of funnel, fantastic. Then you get out of CBO for the middle and bottom funnel anyway. So the only thing I can really see it affecting is that lower funnel part.
So have you tested CBO on retargeting?
I played around with it. Because in theory, it should be really quite easy.
That's right.
But I haven't seen it perform. The audiences are too small.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's we've done some testing on bottom of funnel CBO, and we've done side by side against standard ad sets, and the standard ones just keep on winning. They keep outperforming. And I think it is because of the small audience sizes, but we kind of have to figure this out before September. So, you could still continue with one CBO campaign with a single ad set and then your ads and have the same structure in September. Or, like I'm trying to do is trying to figure out a way to get CBO configured. Because in theory, it should work. So let's take a typical e-com retargeting journey, 0 to 3 days, 3 to 7, 7 to 10, whatever it is, add to cart, view content, all the different permutations. In theory, if you push a single budget into all of those and let Facebook decide, it should work. But I think it comes down to the consistency of the delivery of the traffic and the data going back, so your campaign levels and stuff as well.
And the shifts between certain audiences. So say, for example, the CBO, top of funnel, sends more traffic and you get a higher dropout rate between add to cart to purchase. That can then trigger a big flow-on effect in the lower funnel. So I think having multiple CBOs that way affects, so you don't get a stable number of, but if your add to cart to purchase ratio is stable and it never changes, then it's a lot easier for it to work out. Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on in that part as well.
And one of the things, so if anyone's been advertising probably from before 2014 is when I think the change came in. Prior to 2014, you could actually have, in fact, the structure of a Facebook campaign was campaign and ad. That's all it was. There's no such thing as an ad set. You set the budget and the targeting at the ad level. So in 2014, or roughly about that time, is when Facebook made a fundamental shift to having ad sets. So ad sets didn't even exist. And I think that the CBO change coming up in September is probably as significant of moving a big chunk of your management into the top level. And I don't think that's going to stop there, because the messages I'm getting from Facebook is they're trying to simplify things a lot more for the average advertiser. Now, me and Tom, and probably you guys that are listening right now, you are not average advertisers. You're advanced advertisers. You're following how Facebook is working. You're going deep into learning about CBO before majority have figured it out. You're doing manual bid and stuff like that. And there's I think, what is it, like 6 million advertisers on Facebook right now. We probably represent like a small 5% of that are a lot more advanced. And actually, the majority of people advertising on Facebook. And one of the clues is in Zuckerberg's Q4 review, he said we're going to work harder on supporting smaller businesses. That to me almost sounds like CBO was one of those things to help smaller businesses make sense, because actually Facebook is complex. When someone who doesn't really know how the platform works comes into it, it's actually a lot to take in. If you look at AdWords, for example, I think it was AdWords Express or something like that. They created a simplified version for noobs to come in and kind of figure the platform out. Then they had a separate version for the advanced. Maybe that's where Facebook want to take it as well. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and they took away Power Editor. So now our ads manager is Power Editor.
That's right.
So, you know, those little changes we'll really think. But as, John Loomer, who's an amazing Facebook marketer, teacher as well, he said, you know, like, sky's not going to fall with these changes. So we've seen 1 million changes come through. Look, CBO change, you just got to know, okay, so they're moving the budget allocation from ad set level to campaign level. That's it. Really, if you break it down, that's basically what's happening. Yeah. Does it apply over multiple ad sets? Yes, which is a great thing. We didn't have that tool before. And if you really want to do multiple ad sets, you just use multiple campaigns now. So yes, it's a shift. And yeah, I think they are really trying to assist small businesses. But yeah, the core to it is they're going to keep changing the platform for the better for multiple years. Yeah.
And you know, one of the things where I see Facebook going is more emphasis on creatives, marketing, user journey, and stuff like that. I think they're trying to steer away people from the technicalities, from the hacking and all that kind of stuff, which will always still continue. But I think Facebook went through a phase of just literally giving you so many tools, so many ways to use the platform. And now slowly, one by one, I think they'll start to rein that in slightly. I'd hate for them to take away placement separation. Like, I can imagine maybe a future where you can't actually select a platform and Facebook just decides because they've done research and say that's how it works. And I think that would be a nightmare, but who knows?
They couldn't take away placements because they would love to, because it would increase their profits. But the issue is that creatives are very different.
Yeah, that's right.
Placements have different things. So they can't. But does Facebook understand more about cross-platform, cross-browser, user journeys than us? Yes. So therefore, that's why they would probably recommend placement or multiple placements. As performance marketers, we know we can still optimize better by segmenting placements. However, that usually comes down to the creative type that we're using anyway. I was an advocate of vertical video and 5x4 video so long now. Just incredible uptick in click-through rates and stuff like that from video. So that would be a big shock. Yeah, again, the interface is always going to adapt. And you know what? As you said, look, we're probably in the top 1%, and the guys on your call are probably the top 5% of that 1% in advertising. So, you know, you really got to know that you are quite an advanced beast. And so they will listen to us, but, it's such a complex tool. Yeah. And the other thing is we used to hack the thing to death. We'd try and extract things. And Facebook would actually ask us to say, hey, what are our vulnerabilities? And we would tell them. But then they would remove the tool, so we stopped telling them. Like audience overlap tool, when they removed that, that was because I just said, hey, guys, this is, if you want to do this, you can do it using this. And bang, they turned the tool off. So, okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, it was a shock. I thought about it afterwards. I went, oh, that was a bad idea. But look, it's a good idea to tell them that people could use it to hack. So it's helping. It's more secure.
I'm aware we're 10 minutes over. Do you have a few minutes for questions, or do you need to head off?
Yeah, I've got to get going pretty soon. So
cool. All right, what we'll do is we'll close it here. If you do get a chance to come back and answer the kind of questions that are left, that'd be great. Guys, if you are either on the live or the replay, if you've got any more questions for Tom, just type in #replay and he'll try and come back and answer those as well. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could go on for hours geeking out about this, and hopefully we'll get a chance either in Australia or in London to actually spend more time going deep into this stuff. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Tom. Really appreciate you making the time for this, and enjoy your morning.
No worries, guys. Cheers.
And also, if people want to follow you, what's the best way to do that, Tom?
Oh, follow Depeche and I'll help. I'm not a you know, like just with Kat, I used to hide in the shadows. It's just you know, I run a very successful company doing a whole bunch of things, so I love teaching and learning from you guys. And I have some really amazing connections. Like, for example, if you really want to get into bots and beers, you can check out what we're doing in Messenger or through Ruka. You know, you got Scott and D. You know, you got yourself. You know, there's heaps of people I'm helping out to achieve amazing things. So yeah,
and actually, you know, that's a good point. If you want to see Tom and kind of ask him questions, join my Facebook group, Facebook Ads Expert Academy. Join Rutgers group, Bots and Beers, or Scott and D's
heavyweights.
E-commerce heavyweights, that's one. And you know, Tom will be in there. So join all three of those. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your questions and comments and stuff. We'll try and get back and answer those at some point later today or tomorrow. Cheers, Tom. Have a good one.
Enjoy.
Thanks, guys.